Yesterday was the start of autumn and the start of my favourite time of the year for carp fishing. The days are now shortening and the nighttime temperatures are dropping. All of these signs will become apparent to the carp, and this in turn will make them go out looking for food to get ready for the winter that lays ahead of them. At this time of year, I'd really recommend putting in a good food source. It's something that the fish will really take on board because they know it's good for them and it'll help them survive these freezing cold winter months. But they're moving now out into the deeper pockets in the silt looking for the natural food, the bloodworm and whatever else may lay in amongst that debris on the bottom. Because of this, I'd like to try and use my watercraft to the maximum at this time of year and try and find where these fish are moving, where they're bubbling, where they're feeding. If I can find these locations on any lake, I think I've sort of unlocked the key to where they're going to have their autumn feed-ups. They would definitely be in the silt. The telltale signs will be like the little pinprick bubbles. And what I'll try and do is introduce a good food source in or as close to the area as I can, and I'm hoping that the fish will take it as an extra bonus. Basically, they're already eating what they want naturally, and if there's something else there alongside it which is equally just as nutritious to them, I'm sure that they're going to get their heads down and eat it unquestionably. I believe that as the daylight hours decrease and the nighttime temperatures start to really cool off, that's an indication to them fish to start feeding up for the winter. So with this, I feel that they move into the areas where the natural food is. Everyone seems to think it's always the deepest part of the lake, but that's not necessarily. I think it's where the silt is. So if the silt builds up in between bars and it's only shallow, they will be in them areas feeding in between the bars. But if the silt is in the deeper water, that's where the fish will be. And that's where you'll see them pinprick bubbling, sheeting up and also topping out, clearing out their gills to flush out all the sediment and silt that they've sucked up whilst feeding. I believe these fish will stay in these areas and move around in all areas that are similar and feed on these natural food larders right up until basically it gets really freezing cold and we move into winter, or depending on the stock of the lake, they use up all the supplies and then there'll be even more so on anglers' bait. But as we do step from autumn into winter and the temperatures really do plummet, I don't actually believe that the fish like being in them deeper depths. Some do stay in them areas and they tend to go sort of comatose and lay on the bottom, and them fish will probably lay there all winter. You've seen them if you've ever caught fish after a freezing cold winter, some of them that have been laying up are covered in mucus and they just look like they haven't moved all winter. They're the ones that I believe get caught out by the cold temperatures and actually stay where they are, and their metabolism slows down to such a degree that they ain't got the energy to move off, and I just believe they stay there all winter. But the ones that are, before it gets to that stage, that are still moving about feeding, they sort of slip off into shallower waters, or they move up in the thermoclines and sit up higher in the water. And I believe this sort of happens sort of after December, January time, and they're the fish that'll be up in the layers. And you see them jumping in the middle of winter and they're pristine, they're bright gold in the sun's reflection and that, and they just look really good. And when you catch them fish, like early spring, they're absolutely pristine with no leeches on them, no lice, no slime. You know they've not been laying up. And this is where, for me, I'll be using if I'm on fish that I think are feeding in the winter, I'll be using just an energy food bait that is easily for the fish to pass through. I use the wicked whites a lot in the winter because I know that it's got easily digestible ingredients in it, something that the fish can pass through. But basically, once I come through that sort of December time, I'll most definitely be putting my rigs up in the layers on zigs, because that's where I believe the majority of the fish are, up in the layers. And then as we move into spring and the lake bed becomes alive again, and the warmer temperatures and the longer daylight hours, that's when the fish drop back down and the whole cycle starts again. Just one example of how things can go really well when you find the fish in these areas. One particular session springs to mind. I was on this lake and there was an island out to the front, and off the left hand side of it, it wasn't too deep, probably 5-6 foot, and there was a real silty area there. The fish were evidently feeding in these areas. You could see the bubbles and the telltale signs. Every now and then one would roll, and there was another little, it dropped off a little bit to the left, and there was another deeper area, also like silty. The fish were on both these spots, so I started trickling in the bait. I had a 3-day session ahead of me, and I kept the bait going in, and over the 3 days it went crazy. I basically ran out of bait in the end. I caught 10 fish. I had some real nice ones. I had them up to 39.5. One of them was a real cracking linear. Some nice 30s as well. But basically what I'm trying to get at is I got the bait in the right area where the fish were there to feed on natural food sources anyway, and they weren't bothered about picking up my boilies as well as like the bloodworm and everything else. And I would say they were just gorging themselves on everything they could get. And towards the end of the session, I basically ran out of bait. I was scratching around in my rucksack looking for bits and pieces, and tempted to go around the lake on the ponce for bait, but in the end I had to go home. But I'm pretty sure that if I fed that area again, them fish were probably laying up, having a rest, digesting what they'd eaten, but I'm pretty sure they weren't far away. And if the bait kept going in, I'd carry on catching, 100%.